Welcome to fmtraining.tv. This is our daily live stream. It's 1 hour in high definition. We are broadcasting in 1080, both to Twitch and YouTube simulcast. You can watch us on either location. You can ask us questions in either location. I'm going to be kind of answering the questions and playing MC, and our guest talent today is Art Sevilla. So Art, do you want to show us your face, your screen? Is that, or are you just going to go with your little your picture here? We're going to do something better than that.
I can say hi for a minute here.
Yeah, so there's Art. Welcome, Art. Kind of an okay camera, good enough for now. You guys see what Art looks like. Art has been around us for a while now. He's one of the sharper coaches that we have in our coaching program. He's really quite good at doing API integration. So today is about connecting FileMaker to other data systems, right? And and of course, some of you are be asking all sorts of questions, and I want you to ask the questions, and we will answer those as they come up. Like, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And what about that? So this is a 3-day event. It will be recorded. So Art, what are we covering today, and why does it matter? And just start off with the basics here. Oh, you're muted, Art. At least you're muted to me, you are.
Oh, yep. Sorry, I was muted there. So yeah, what we'll be going over today is FileMaker and integrating with APIs. And we're going to be doing that over a 3-day series. So to break that down, what we're going to be going over today, and let me share my screen here. Screen 2. Can you guys see that?
Yeah, it's coming up. Pretty blank. Right. Pretty blank at the moment.
All right. So for today, for day 1, this is what we're going to be covering today for the most part. So we're going to just kind of go through a working demo just to kind of see what hooking up to an API can do for your solution. And it's going to be a very simple demo that we'll go through. Then we're going to talk about APIs and what they actually are. So what does API mean? What types of APIs, what type of APIs there are. We're also going to talk about how they can improve your business, and that's of course going to depend on a API service by service basis. We're also going to talk about REST and JSON and what those mean. We're going to go through a tool that helps interact with APIs and kind of learn how they operate, what the endpoints are, what kind of information you get, what format they expect you to make the request, and what format they give you the response in. Then we're also going to go over a product called Geist Interactive Generator, and that is essentially a version of this tool, Postman, but built all in FileMaker. So we'll go through with that, and then at the end, we'll have a little QA session where you guys can ask some questions. You guys can also ask questions throughout the broadcast, and we'll have a couple people answering as we go along. But at the end, what we'll also do is we'll take some requests from you guys. If you guys have an API that you've been thinking about integrating for some time, or you know, wanted to get started on your own, maybe there's something you want to toss out there that we maybe build something very quickly just to get you started. So we'll leave some time for that at the end as well.
So let's talk about a couple things real quick. We cover APIs in a very similar way with actually some more information in our live training. So once again, this is the reminder that to make sure that to support the channel, to make sure that we're here every day for you, make sure that you support the channel. How do you do that? You would check out our bundle packages that we do sell, our FileMaker training. It's upwards of 80 hours of content. It's a lot of content. It's very inexpensive. We have a bundle that allows you to have a copy of FileMaker with all our tools, including an enhanced version of FM Starting Point. And then we also have the video only bundle here. And these are 1-year subscriptions, which will keep you up to date. So when we come out with new training for the next version of FileMaker, which we will, which is coming soon, right? Then we will, you will get that automatically as part of your subscription. And so it's a 1-year subscription, and if your subscription elapses, I really recommend that you renew. If you want a discount coupon, once again, I tell people this, and then they kind of, you know, forget about it. Go to support, email support@RC Consulting, and you will be given, just I say, hey, Richard said a $50 coupon, and we will send you both of those links to buy those, but for $50 off each price. So that's the our shameless plug for how you support the channel and how you keep us coming back every day. Because when you buy the training, it allows us to keep the lights on and buy the computers. Anyway, Art, you ready to go? You ready to dive into this? And obviously we're going to have to explain what is an API and why do I care, right? I think that's the most important thing to start off with. We don't have questions yet.
Right.
I will interrupt as we go. So I'm going to pivot back to you and go full screen on your desktop.
All right, perfect. So what we're going to start off with is just kind of showing a working demo just to kind of see what this would look like in a live situation. So I have a copy of Starting Point here, which is my own personal copy of Starting Point. And as you can see right here, I've actually replaced one of the charts on the dashboard with a weather widget. So this actually pulls from a service from AccuWeather. They have a public API that we can use to pull this information. And with this particular one, I've actually just put in a location. So I'm in San Luis Obispo, California, on the Central Coast, and we are having a beautiful sunny day. It's about 75 right now. I can hit this button right here to update the weather, and what it'll do is it'll go to AccuWeather and it'll update that information, which
Yeah,
but
yeah, it did already
change.
change. You're down to 72 degrees. It changed. You were 75 a second
Yep.
ago. But now this is like kind of like this would almost be like a demo you get from Claris, right, or FileMaker. It's like, oh, here's the weather. It's like, right, or here's a map.
Right.
Talk about the people you coach without being overly specific and giving anything away proprietary. But you're helping with people with this API stuff right now. What kinds of things are they doing that is meaningful to their business?
So yeah, and then this is just to be one of the simplest examples out there. And for some people, it might apply. Like I do have a client that runs a flight academy, a flight school, and we had a weather module on their dashboard because that was something that they wanted to see every day when they started, because they wanted to know what the day's conditions were going to be and whether they could go out flying with their cadets. So weather can be useful. Other integrations that we've done are like PayPal, Stripe, Square, so payment processors. Certain ones will have APIs that you can leverage to work into your database. And actually, speaking of PayPal, we actually, if you guys are familiar with FM Starting Point, we do have a version that has PayPal integration in there. So there are services, there are financial services, there's data services, information services, where you can leverage their backend. They've already done the work and did all the structure, the backend schema and everything, and you can leverage their work to pull information into your database, into your solution. So that's what we see here. And then for those of you that have used our PayPal system in Starting Point, that's leveraging the PayPal API there as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, so the idea is that an API is a fancy way of saying that you have two systems or two computer systems that are talking to each other. API is a fancy word and the modern term for application programming interface. Doesn't matter. It's just the way that two systems talk to each other. We have customers call us all the time that, obviously you hear things like QuickBooks and PayPal and things like that, but for example, we have people, a business that we're talking to, and they actually go after people in terms of they haven't paid their bills and they're delinquents and all that sort of stuff, which this day, right now, it's a really big business, unfortunately, right? Because some people just got jammed up on this virus thing. And a lot of people are being, not demanding payment immediately, but there were people who are already in deep trouble before the virus thing ever hit. And so this company has hundreds of employees and they use FileMaker, and they need data feeds from the other companies that are giving them, here's the people we need to chase down and get the money for us. Those data feeds from these other companies aren't coming, for example, necessarily with a tab delimited file. It's the idea that you're talking about, instead of a tab delimited file, it's an API communication between this other system that's not FileMaker and FileMaker, right? Now you can have two FileMaker systems that exchange via API, right? Data back and forth. That's totally doable. We could talk about that if we want, but there's two systems. So if there's data out there somewhere, you need it or you want to push data to it, then this is the way we do it. So, Art, back to you.
All right, so yeah, that's a very simple, like I said, working demo here of an API, and that one's just the weather one. So what we're going to go through now are a couple of terms so that we're all on the same page when we're talking about APIs, because these are terms that we use. And pull this over here. So on the surface level, an API, what is an API? Obviously, it's an acronym, and it stands for Application Programming Interface, which is essentially a system of tools and resources in an OS that enables developers to create software applications. So allows you to plug into their system and extract information out of it. Now, there are a few different types of APIs that you might come across as you're kind of starting to explore maybe integrating a certain API into your solution. There are what are called open APIs, also known as public APIs, which mean that they are open to use for the most part. They usually don't have any kind of licensing fees or usage fees or anything like that associated with them. At most, they might have you have what's called an API key, which we'll go over in a little bit. Then we have partner APIs. Partner APIs are essentially the paid ones. So you essentially need to license their API, which usually means you have to pay them to use it. And so that's where the partner comes from. You're basically partnering with them by license to use their service. Internal APIs, these ones are kind of what they sound like. They're private APIs that basically companies will develop for their own internal systems that the public or third-party developers cannot access. Occasionally, you'll come across some. So if you're looking for an API for a specific service and you don't find one from them directly and you see something saying like an unofficial API or something like that, it's usually because some kind of hacker or developer figured out their private API and then documented themselves and posted it publicly. So if you run into unofficial API, that's usually what that means. Composite API is a kind of a combination of the two. Some services have a public one that you can use and then have an internal one that they use for their services. And then they also have some other features in them that will kind of help with the computations
Now,
of whatever request you're making.
wouldn't that be? Is that like Google would be kind of like that because they have kind of a public one, and then but you really have to get your own API key and then potentially pay for it, right? So would that be kind of a Google thing, or which one would be Google for like Google Maps or something?
Right. So they do utilize different. So like it combines different data and service APIs. So with Google, they do leverage some of their other APIs within certain APIs, and a lot of that is abstracted to the user. So this one you guys probably won't need to worry about as much, but it is a type that they do define. So that goes over the API types. The ones that you guys will probably be working with the most are these top two, the open APIs and the partner APIs. So again, public ones are usually the free ones. At most, you'll have like an access key or an access token or API key that you'll use. The partner ones usually you have to pay for.
Real quick, so then Top Cat was saying, hey, well, can I get an API to get information from my phone? I mean, Apple Watch is constantly monitoring my heart rate, etc. And so your phone is not going to really be an API source, but what you would be able to do
No.
is if the data is being uploaded to the cloud
Right.
somewhere, then once the data was up in a cloud on a server, theoretically, assuming that Apple allowed for this, you'd be able to go and be able to tap that information and get that out. So remember, so understand that as a general rule, very loosely, once again, and I'm talking loosely here, if you're going to talk to an API, to a service that's an API, you're talking to their server, right? Which is not your
Right.
watch, right? And I'm waving in my hands so people can see me here. So understand that you might have a watch, like a Fitbit or something. In fact, one of our engineers did a deal where he was talking to that, but he wasn't really talking to the Fitbit. He was talking to the online service. So Fitbit or your watch, you may or may not like this, but for the most part, they report how you're doing to the internet. And if it's up the internet, then that means other people know about it, not just you. So if you have a secret heart
Right.
condition, right, don't use a device like that, right? And so once it's uploaded to the internet, when it uploads it, it goes up to a server, which means that server then, if someone set it up, could be a source of data to download that information to FileMaker or something else. The next question from Ron: would an API be used to get weight from trucks? Okay, well, okay, what's the question?
Sorry, Richard, I just wanted to make one more comment on that before we moved on. There's also a distinction between a web API and like a hardware API. So there are interfaces that you can use to interact with hardware, and it basically pulls data from hardware. What we're talking about today are web service APIs. So if you wanted to get information from your phone, you're starting to talk about like iOS development, and there are APIs and frameworks that you can use when you're building an app in that environment to pull that info. But web service
API is a very big, So I guess, I mean, maybe you should
term,
put, put a big splash screen over web service API, right? So because we have additional question here right along this line. So Ron says, would a API be used to get a weight from a truck scales, like an elevator industry, the weight on the truck scale? We have a customer that we've already program that, set that up for. We don't use an API. They have a truck scale that has software that talks to a Windows machine through RS-232 port or some old thing. And then we had to get into the, not web service API, but do some API work under the hood locally that machine to be able to get the truck scale data out of that. It's literally a scale that talks to the PC, and we get it out of the PC, goes into FileMaker. We did that for a customer. They do hazardous materials management, so they weigh the truck when it leaves and then weigh it when it comes back, and that way they know how much toxic crap is in the back of the dump truck, right? And so very interesting. Is there a website that displays the APIs available? Okay, here's a great question. So is there a website that displays all that? I'm going to put web APIs in here going forward. Web APIs that are available, or is it scattered everywhere, right? And that's for you.
Yes, there actually are a few websites that do give you some good resources for APIs.
But that's not what he asked. I mean, I understand a good resource, okay? But is there a website that displays? He didn't say all the APIs, but I will add the word all APIs that are available, or is it scattered all over? And so officially there's no registration of APIs. It's not like the DMV or something where all the cars have to be registered, for example. You can turn FileMaker Server into a web API source for people. You could, in FileMaker, type down your lunch schedule every day, and then through FileMaker Server and the data API, you could actually create an API that people could come into with a web API and extract out what you had for lunch. Your website would not be registered anywhere. So you as a software company can do this. There is no single directory listing. However, getting to what Art said, there are great resources. So Art, I will let you. What's your favorite?
Just as an example.
Yeah.
Just as an example, Rapid API is a good one that keeps their list up to date. So they do have like categories. They have like top 10, top 50 lists. I think you can even go by category. But there are a few other websites like this that will show you which companies have public APIs that you can leverage within your solution. So this, like I said, Rapid API, this is one source that I've come to occasionally when I'm looking for more obscure APIs that aren't very marketed or advertised, and they'll usually be on here. So there are other websites like this, but you would use websites like this to try to find. Usually it's when you're looking for an obscure one. I mean, if you're kind of already knowing what you're looking for, and you know the company that you're working with already has an API, then obviously you'll want to stick with them. But if you don't know of something, you're just kind of browsing and exploring for options. Websites like this are good to discover APIs, public APIs that you can use.
Nathan Schneider just adds that if you Google public APIs, GitHub has a repository, which would make sense. GitHub has a lot of stuff. But once again, like for example, there's a Chuck Norris one there. Could do me a favor and hit learn more on Chuck Norris. I would love to know what the Chuck Norris API, because I love Chuck Norris. He's awesome. So click on 13, learn more. So what is Chuck Norris API?
Probably just gives you like a Chuck Norris joke or something every time you ping it. Yeah, jokes, random. Yeah, random jokes.
Really? Okay. So this is okay. So that has nothing to do with kung fu and bad guys and good guys. And
no, just the Chuck Norris jokes apparently.
I guess I don't know that. So once again, you can have APIs that do really stupid things, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Pretty much anything. I mean, there's a love calculator here. Yeah, so there's tons and tons of them, and you can use resources like this to help narrow it down. And they do rank them, and they have reviews and stuff, so they can kind of give you an idea of whether or not they're reputable or trustworthy. So
Right.
um,
It's important. I mean, I think that gets back to our next thing is in terms of web service APIs. I mean, there are these other ones that you've identified, right? I mean, SOAP used to be a big deal.
yes, it's pretty outdated at this point, and so these are some terms that you'll come across as well while researching the APIs. SOAP is kind of an older one. It uses XML as the format to translate or transmit the data. So XML, if you guys are familiar with, is a format, and it stands for Extensible Markup Language. Um, that format supports various types of data, so you can actually get text, numbers, images, graphs, stuff like that. Mainly focuses on the document itself, which is why you can put stuff like this in it. And it is a little bit more secure. Whereas REST, so I'm going to kind of skip these because these two right here aren't very important. You probably won't ever run into these, or very rarely. This is very similar to SOAP, except it uses a slightly proprietary, slightly different format for the XML that it passes. And it's a little bit older than SOAP. Uses less bandwidth, and it's a little bit simpler than SOAP, but it's a bit older, and I don't believe it's as secure as SOAP. Then JSON RPC, it's very similar to the top two, except it uses JSON in their protocols instead of the XML. But it's not as lightweight and easy as REST. So now we get to REST, and REST is what you see a lot of these public APIs now using, especially more modern ones, which stands for Representational State Transfer. REST is a set of architectural principles. It's not necessarily a protocol like these other ones up here. And what that means is it's kind of like a suggestion list. It's not a strict set of rules that when you're building a REST API that you have to follow. It's just a set of suggestions that try to keep it consistent. So that's important because you'll actually run across APIs as you start to explore them and you go through different ones. You'll start to notice that they don't all have the same implementation. They all have differences. Some of them are subtle, some of them are a little bit more crucial, a little bit more critical, but you'll start to notice that there are some differences, and that's because REST is not a strict protocol. It's a set of principles that people can adhere to, but they don't have to.
So what is JSON in this then? Where does that fit? And then I don't see questions here. Yeah, someone said we need
I
more
don't.
Chuck Norris jokes on the YouTube side. So
So, like I said, loose guidelines to allow developers to make recommendations easily. So that's just so that they can implement their REST API more easily. Loose guidelines, not strict. Driven by data. So you asked the question, where does JSON come into this? The data, or the JSON is the data. So when you're passing data from a REST service, either you're pulling it from the REST service or you're passing it to the REST service, it's all data driven. So you build your JSON. So JSON is JavaScript Object Notation. That's what it's short for. It's all text. So it only supports text and numbers. And I'll show you an example of that here in just a second. But it's very simple data. It's all, like I said, text-based and numbers. There's no image data. There's no any bit data or anything like that. It's just all text and numbers. And so it's very lightweight, and it's platform agnostic. So any platform, whether you're working on mobile, web, FileMaker, SQL, whatever, all of those platforms have a way to interact with JSON. And that's why REST is really nice, because it's platform agnostic, and anything can communicate with the service and then can also read the data that's being passed back and forth. So JSON is going to be very important here.
so do you want to? What do you want? I mean, because JSON and REST are kind of the standards that we see anymore. It's important for understanding basically that there were these other kind of web APIs, but SOAP. I mean, SOAP was a big deal in 97, 98, 99. So we're talking solid 20 years ago, and so REST is the
Right.
modern version of stuff. So. Um, So what's next on your list of things that you want to do today?
So I'm gonna show you some JSON just to kind of let you see what that looks like, so you have an idea, and then I'm gonna kind of walk through Postman. So right here, this is an example of JSON. So again, very simple. It's all text-based, so you only see text and numbers. Um, and each one of these is a key value pair. So there's some important notations here. So this curly brace is the start of a what's called a JSON object. So everything within this curly brace is called a JSON object. And so within that object, we have key value pairs. So these right here on each line are called key value pairs. They're separated by a colon. On the left of the colon is the key. On the right of the colon is the value. And these are separated by a comma. So each key value pair is separated by a comma. So that's the very, very basic structure of JSON. Obviously, it gets a little bit more complicated than that if you have lists or nested objects, which we'll get to, but not today.
All right, you're
That
good.
just gives you guys
Keep going.
an overview of that.
Yeah.
And so now,
Okay. Look, I have a question. So,
go ahead.
XML used to be like the thing, right? It was the thing, right? And people still use a lot of XML, but
Right.
JSON's kind of like XML because there's this hierarchical, part in there, right? Yes. I mean, they're both very similar from that.
Yes.
So, do you know why people aren't using XML anymore, and why we're using JSON?
It's generally more cumbersome to use. I mean, there are some pros to using XML over JSON. Usually, when it comes to security, there are some features that XML has that JSON doesn't. Again, because JSON is purely text-based. So, in certain environments, they won't offer a REST API. It just depends on the service and what their requirements are for like their security. But it depends on what they're doing. I mean, you still see financial services, obviously like Stripe and Square and PayPal using REST. But there are some differences structurally. JSON again is very simple, just text, whereas XML can be different kinds of data. And it is more cumbersome to use. I mean, even in FileMaker, they never really added native XML script steps or functions to work with XML. You usually have to use a custom function to pull values out of XML.
Correct. But with JSON, they're actually adding more and more direct support for that.
Exactly.
Because if you look at that JSON object, we spent some time doing virtual lists with Calvin, and it went over several days. And it's very much like a virtual list, right? It's multiple columns of data within one block of text. And so it's just a different way.
Right. And
so, yeah.
just to kind of show you a more complex JSON block. So now you see that there's nested JSON objects within nested JSON objects, and there's a hierarchy here. And so we'll go through some of this more complex JSON. It's just I wanted to keep it simple for today just to go through this. But obviously it can get a bit more complex. But again, it's still all simple data. It's all just text. Yes, so Postman is an application that you can download, and it looks like this. So this is Postman here. This is what you get when you start. And essentially what it allows you to do is it allows you to create these collections, and each collection ties to a different service. So you can see I have a bunch of services that I've played around with here over time. And it allows you to organize your calls so that you can come back to them and just make them really quickly so you don't have to type everything back in. So it allows you to save your collections and work a little bit more efficiently in that regard.
Okay.
It also
take a step back. Okay, so first off, it's a free app. It's Mac and Windows. Yes.
It is Mac and Windows, and it is a free application. Yes.
Okay, so you said it has collections of calls, but I mean, I think the fact that it has a collection of calls is like secondary. I think primarily, how would you describe Postman if you had to describe it? Like you're doing an elevator pitch, you're the Postman company. You got 90 seconds and 2 sentences to explain what Postman does. What does it do?
It allows you to quickly and efficiently prototype your processes when you're working with an API service.
Very good. So you get to structure the call that you make to an API service, test it, and then once you kind of bake it and it's working the way you want, you would copy kind of the code out of there and stick it in the FileMaker because it's easier to prototype here than it is in FileMaker, correct?
Right. Yeah, it's a lot faster to build these calls, these requests to the API, getting the structure down, and then also getting the responses. You can also test to check for errors that you might get so that you can handle them a little bit better in FileMaker. So this, like I said, is more so for rapid and quick development when you're working with APIs, because it's a lot quicker to do this. And a lot of services actually will give you a collection that you can just download from their from their website, and you don't have to do any of this on your own. There was one that I just downloaded. Oh, it was GoToMeeting. So GoToMeeting, if you go to their developer website, they just have a collection that you can download, and all you have to do is put in your information from your account, and you can start running the calls and testing. So the collections are actually kind of handy when the company actually provides them for you. So let me make a quick little demo call here, and I guess I'll do the VIN number lookup.
And so make sure you're talking through what you're doing here because the rest of us, and we're getting a little pixelation over here on this. It's your outbound stream, so I'm assuming you don't have anything you can turn off over there, but
I'm not doing anything else right now.
Yeah, everyone's at home working. That's the problem. So
yeah, it's peak right now. Okay, so what I did over here in this little drop down, you can change your environment. So obviously you have a different set of variables for each service that you have, like different API keys and access tokens and whatnot. So this allows you to be able to switch between them quickly as you switch between your collections. So I was just switching it over to this one so that I can run this. So this one is a VIN number lookup. So this is for vehicles. It looks up through a government database where they have a public API, which is the NHTSA. If you go to their website, they have their documentation, and you just pass it a VIN number, which is here. We'll go through the specifics of what all of these are here in the URL tomorrow as we go through the demos. But just to show you what this does, if I hit send here, it's going to send the request, and this is the response that service gives me back. And so this is all in JSON. And the first thing it gives me is a count because it returned multiple results for this VIN number that I put in here.
okay, so let me pause just for a second here. So so this is the command. This is basically this URL. It's like for those of you who wonder about it, it's kind of like an HTTP with a bunch of stuff on it, right? There's
I can actually show you this is the URL right here.
Okay, there's the URL right there. So it inserts that. But the idea, if you go ahead and close that, is the idea that it's going to send this out kind of like a browser would send it out very loosely here. There's some additional hidden things in here that we'll talk about. And then what comes back is this data right here. So it's very important to understand that this tool is allowing us to abstract out certain parts of it, and the pixelation here is really ugly on this. I would minimize, just quit driving for a second, Art. If you saw how bad this was, you would quit moving your mouse, because as soon as you quit moving the mouse, it actually gives a chance to draw on the screen over here. So yeah, now it's pretty sharp. So what happens is this is the base URL. We're going to put some additional things in here. For those of you who don't know what a VIN is, a VIN, vehicle identification number, is a legit primary key for every motor vehicle created anywhere, I guess, in the world for the most part. And
in the world, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're making, the Chinese make copies of Hummers and Humvees and stuff, so I don't know if they would use a VIN number or not. But certainly within the United States and Europe and Australia, as long as you're part out of a criminal enterprise, then yeah, you're going to have a primary key. So you can issue that primary key out to data systems. It should come back and tell you what is on that car, because the manufacturer at the time they made it logged that information probably with the government somewhere. Somewhere there was a government entry on that. And so what we're doing is we're sending the primary key off of this. Some of you, like I have actually a couple engineers who refused it, and I'm not even talking about Art in this case. I'm thinking about Jacob Taylor, but he doesn't want a car because he really likes biking everywhere he goes in the office, and he lives close to the office. So I think he knows what a VIN number is, but if you when you buy a car, the VIN number is an important part of it, right? And it's a little plate that's under the glass window, right? So, is there a barcode on that?
Or on the inside of the door. It's
Inside of
usually
the
on the inside
door,
of the
right?
driver's door.
Yeah.
And yes, there's usually a barcode. So one of the cool things I've done with this particular API, and actually this will be part of the demos tomorrow, is you can actually on an iPhone or an iPad on FileMaker Go, you can actually scan that barcode with the camera, pass it to a script that then passes that code to this API, and then automatically fills in the information for the vehicle. So that is going to be one of the demos that we
Yeah.
use tomorrow. And so you guys will see how that actually works out.
So yeah, so the Postman part is pretty cool because it allows you to play with all the variables here, and then this block of data comes back, and it would come back into a variable or into like a global field or something in FileMaker. Then you would have to parse this apart, some sort of scripted process that's going to run. It's going to spin. It'll find the bits and pieces and put them on screen in a presentable fashion. Is the idea. So. So how do you know? David asks, how do you know you received a JSON or XML response? Well, XML looks really different, right? But yeah.
Well, yeah, XML looks entirely different, but the main thing is the API, the documentation will tell you what format to expect, and it'll also tell you which format to. Oh, the screen's hard to read. I'll change that there for you. It should be a little bit better, hopefully. So the API will tell you, and some of them will give you the option. So like this one in particular, if you see here, I have this key format and the value JSON. I'm actually telling this service that hey, I want my response back in JSON. I believe they have an XML option. Let me see if I.
And that's a big part of the challenges with this world in general.
So now this is an XML, as you can see here.
So it was up to the service, the people who set this up at the source, wherever the government or wherever this lives, to decide whether they're going to support JSON or XML. It's also the more important thing is the documentation. Documentation varies widely, and I mean really widely.
Yes.
For example, even with FileMaker's made some changes to the documentation for Cloud 2. Right? A lot of you have heard me say, well, what about doing this with Cloud 2? Well, Cloud 1 does support this stuff, setting FileMaker up as a source for this stuff. But Cloud 2, it's not documented well and or even correctly. And so I've been going round. That's why we've withheld our endorsement of some parts of Cloud 2. Like if you need an API service or something like that, you need your database to do that. You really, right now, you need to be using FileMaker Server, not Cloud 2, because this is all screwed up with Cloud 2 to set this up. Once again, it's screwed up from the standpoint that FileMaker Server is the source, right? So if you have your FileMaker Cloud, right, FMC2, and you want to enter, people send a request, they get data back, and that's an API, a web API, that is kind of broke. Now, if you're using FileMaker, the client, like Pro, like you're logged onto a hosted site, and you're trying to extract data from like the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, or something like that, then going and getting the data and bringing it back to FileMaker is not a problem. It's where FileMaker is the source. And that's where Jacob Taylor, one of our server guys, has been wrestling with FileMaker on that. And it went round and round until FileMaker went, oh, yeah, you're right. That's not well documented, and that's kind of a problem, and we're not sure what to do. And then literally they walked away from it after, that from 2 to 3 weeks ago. So hopefully someday engineering down there will figure that out. But yes, so questions. I'm looking. Oh, Andre, type of request is important to mention get versus post. Yeah, you want to hit that real quick? Andre, Andre ought to be in here with us sometime. He's quite the sharp cookie.
Yes, good point. And we will be going through that in particular a little bit more in detail tomorrow, but just to kind of mention it briefly here, there are different types of requests that you can make depending on what you're doing. So if you're pulling information from the service, most of the time you're going to be making what's called a GET request. So it's in the name. You're getting information. Most of the time when you're receiving it, you're going to be using GET requests. But if you're actually doing a two-way communication between the service, so you're pulling information down from them, but you're also pushing information back up to them, you would use some of these other ones here, the post, put, and patch. And those ones, they do very specific things. So like I said, we'll go through these in more detail as we actually start to go into the code on some of the examples tomorrow. But yeah, just to give you a brief little comment on that, that's the method of the request, and it basically says whether or not you're pushing data to them or getting data from them.
Yeah, that's a good question.
But
There,
good comment there.
yeah, it's a good comment from Andre. Yeah, the issue with this, of course, is once again this whole thing. If I ever hear people cussing and swearing, and I know it's a web API related, it almost always comes back to documentation, right? When we first set
That's
up the
usually my
documentation,
headache.
yeah, it's normally the headache for everyone. We were setting up PayPal a couple of years ago. PayPal had it kind of documented, then they changed some things, and they had not updated their documentation. So once again, if you're going to build an API service and you want people to be able to use it, you need some sort of, however the documentation is, it's a video documentation or text written in a PDF documentation, whatever, there has to be some sort of updated documentation. Art, weren't you telling me that this is such a prevalent problem in the industry that there's a company that just helps you write your
Yeah,
documentation? So,
yeah. There's a company that spawned out of that frustration, and so they actually went around and offered to companies to build their documentation for them. So they had a system where they could more dynamically build it out for them, but it's such an issue that someone made a business out of it.
well, and this gets back to engineers, issues with engineers in general. So you have a lot of FileMaker, even FileMaker developers that are really code guys, and some of you folks, Andre is one of you folks there. Yeah, I'm gonna. Yeah, if some of you want to download Postman for tomorrow and you want to follow along, maybe we should try to do that. That'd be kind of cool. So we could
Yeah, we could
actually
do that.
try like a virtual class for Michael. That would be really great. Anyone who wants to do that, that'd be fine, and we'll kind of walk them through. In fact, if you want to come up with a reset of this thing, so you can walk, they'll see it the same way you do. I don't want you to
Yeah,
destroy all your stuff here.
I'll sign out of my account here, and that way we can
Do it,
start like
do it. But
with
it's
most of them.
free,
We'll
and they
start with.
should do that. But yeah, so the idea, the documentation is really a huge deal, and so yeah, so PayPal had not updated the documentation. It was a real challenge to understand what they were doing. So developers like to code, and then they're done. They give each other high fives, like, oh, that's the most awesome stuff ever, and then they like to move on to the next challenge. Very few developers like to sit and document. That's why when you see people comment your scripts as you go, comment your code as you go. Oh, I don't want to comment the code. I'll just do it at the end. Okay, that's fine if you actually do it at the end and you don't forget what you were doing in the first place. I have to comment as I go. It slows me down by a lot, but then it helps me go back and understand what I was doing. And so fundamentally, the developers not wanting to write down documentation or comments and stuff, that's not good business. But two, it's just a function of that kind of personality. They like to give them an engineering problem, they solve it, they want to move on to the next challenge. They don't want to sit and write a book about how their crap works. And so that's a universal problem, not just in our world, it's everywhere. And as a result of that, this company created a business where they come in behind you. I guess they have to pin down the engineers, interrogate them, and then they write the documentation, which is kind of
No,
fun.
they actually have a. It was actually like a something that the developers had to put in their code, and then their proprietary software basically went through their code base and generated documentation based off of that.
Wow, automatic. That's even smarter. So it's like almost AI. That's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
So Brutterman is jumping around. First I see him on YouTube. Now he's on Twitch. I don't know what the deal is with that. You're jumping back and forth. You guys confuse me. So I have Postman on a second screen because it's easy to follow along. That would help a lot. Yeah. So we recommend people watch this on full screen. Art, for whatever reason, whenever you start flailing with the mouse, and I do the same thing, it causes a redraw in this area like this right now. It's redrawing and it's really pixelated. Then it comes back. It's like there's not enough keyframes in Slack or whatever. So maybe it'll be better tomorrow. But people want to have this full screen on one screen. I would have full screen on one screen. This is where, I don't know, it's kind of hard for you to see what I'm doing over here, but behind me, there's actually 1, 2, 3 screens behind me. So if you could do it, I know this is a little exorbitant because there's other screens over here. I got like 6 screens around me. But do one where you're watching the video, like a 24, 27-inch display, and then another screen where you're doing Postman side by side. And we will do a walk-along. Can you do that? Do a walk-along tomorrow? Like everyone do this, do that. People love that. Like seriously
Yeah.
love it. Yeah. So this will be like a training class,
And
and it's free. So
what I can do also is for the demos that we're going to be doing, I can save couple of collections and just make them publicly available so you guys can download them and follow along.
Well, as long as you can explain it, and we don't want to have a lot of fancy tech support. So, what should they do? Do they need to, when they download Postman? Like if I go to Postman over here, and if watch this.
I just put the link in the
okay,
in the Twitch chat.
Postman.com. Here it is. So then when you download it, so if I download it here, and so it's going to the Mac one here for me. I'm going to allow it to download. Do I have to like create an account in it then? So have that already going too? You think? Or
no, you can use it with no account. The only thing the account does is it syncs it your collections and everything between your computers.
that would be cool. So if you have more than one computer, like here and here and here and here and here.
Yeah, like so for me, my office computer and my laptop are synced up. So
All right, so
if I
I'm
add a collection on one side, it's already there.
Yeah, I'm downloading it right here, so I'm not sharing. Oh, there it is. So do I just put it in my applications, I guess? I put it over here.
Yeah.
I double click it and see what happens. And then allow it to open because of security. And it's blinking. I got the... Okay, it wants me to create an account. So I do need to create an account, right, with them somehow?
Oh, they might have changed that at some point.
Yeah, but it is.
I've had my
It's
account
still
for
free,
several
right?
years, but-
It's still free, theoretically?
Yes, it is still free. They do offer a paid version of it, but the free version is fine for everybody. I think the only thing the paid version does is it allows you to collaborate more. So if you have a team and you're working on an API or something, you can collaborate.
Yeah, there's a
and
link
share
up here that
collections.
says enterprise user up here, so I think they're doing that. But yeah, so yeah, once again, good tool. It's been free, and so if everyone wants to get that going and get it set up and going, and then we will play. We will actually all work on the DMV or the Vin one tomorrow, and then whatever. It'll be good. I think we've never actually done. Michael had a good suggestion. We all kind of do it along together. You know, listen. The days of doing a lot of big classrooms and stuff, especially right now until they get this virus thing under control, classrooms are all going to be virtual. This is the new classroom. So if we can like guide you along and you can do it and follow along, it'd be great. And if I had little windows of everyone's faces here along the bottom, that would be really cool. But that's probably asking a lot. So anyway, cool. All right, other questions we have from Andre, because yeah, it's a multi-effort day to kick all this out. I've got 3 days set for it. If we need another day, we will bump. Art, there is a question here about what are some of the challenges in using the, I'm assuming data API in FileMaker. I'm assuming, because if we say data API in FileMaker, we're talking about FileMaker server or cloud as the source, right? So when you folks ask questions, make sure that you frame it so we know what we're talking about. Or are we talking about challenges as using FileMaker Pro or Go or WebDirect as an API client, a consumer? So whether you're the source of the data or the consumer, the taker in of the data, I guess is the question. So you want to answer that?
I think he's asking like what challenges might we come up in when we're integrating an API in a FileMaker. So if that's the question, that's a really good question because there have been some challenges. I mean, ever since FileMaker came out with the native JSON functions, I've probably been one of the busiest as far as testing and experimenting with different API services in FileMaker. Probably the biggest headache that I've come across with dealing with an API in FileMaker is if they include an authentication protocol called OAuth. That can be kind of tricky to deal with in FileMaker, and actually on day 3, that's what we're going to be covering most of that day is dealing with OAuth and what you might run into when a service is using OAuth. Because OAuth is kind of the same thing with the REST, where it's almost like a set of suggestions where not everybody implements it in the exact same way. So there'll be subtle differences in how you go through that process. But that one by far was the biggest headache I've run into so far. Outside of that, uploading data files like an image or a PDF or something to an API service can sometimes be tricky. So like uploading a file to your Dropbox folder or something. I ran into some issues with that, but we've had some other engineers in RCC handle that well. We could probably do something with Dropbox on the last day.
We need to get John.
But yeah,
we need to get Hogel in for that because he's our Dropbox guy for that.
Okay, but
okay.
yeah, outside of that, those have been my personal headaches with working with REST
Well,
APIs in FileMaker.
yeah,
But
so expect tomorrow to go long, folks, and we will obviously record it. So if you can't do it, but realistically, if we go more than 90 minutes, most of you are going to be bleeding out your ears from too much knowledge pouring into your brain. MailSoft does have a question here. He's kind of off topic. What is a device that you use that I think is USB to trigger something in FileMaker? Okay, so the only hardware that I'm currently using right now to trigger stuff in FileMaker, or not even FileMaker, is this right here. It's called Stream Deck. It's for basically live stream people, mostly gamers and stuff. They can do stuff on here. But for example, if I want to, we could wire it up so FileMaker could do certain things. Remember, Oscar was using that app one time, but the company went out of business. That's always the problem with free things, because unless the company has a way of monetizing free, leveraging free sucks. Like, for example, runtime in FileMaker. How much do you pay for it? Realistically, it's free. So where's the incentive for FileMaker to do it? Doesn't exist. Runtime gets cut out of the product. So whenever you're looking at something, you want to leverage it for your business process. Make sure that someone's making money off of that, and they're not just doing it for free on the hopes that someday they'll make money, because many a company has gone blown up because there's not a strategy to monetize, right? So like Starting Point's free, but we have a strategy to monetize that down the road. So it can, after 12 years, it's still going strong. So so this is called Stream Deck. It's like $100 and whatever bucks, and they have a bigger one now too. And so if I press the buttons on here, I've got them set up to where I can bring up a website very easily. I've got it programmed, so like say for example, I've minimized this, but I want to see that. If I press that button, I press another button, that brings me back into the corner. Various websites on here, I can pop images up. You can open a video and play it full screen. It took a little bit of a hack with another application. So that's what I'm using. I'm not sure if that's the question he asked. Definitely, if you have questions like about how we do what we're doing or what we're doing, feel free to shoot them to support at RC Consulting. They will get to me. Just make sure you say, hey, live stream question. And so with that, and so the last, I have the opening video and the closing video in here, which is the last thing I push when everyone goes bye-bye. So, Art, any final thoughts about tomorrow? Tomorrow's going to be Postman hell, right? So everyone get lined up. Andre said if we want to buy another product, he's using PAW, P-A-W. I've never used PAW, and so I don't have any information on that. He says it's a good alternative, but all we can do is mention it. Since we haven't used it, we're sure not going to like turn on in front of people and try to use it. But if it's decisively, better than Postman, then yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, so hopefully we can get all this done. That'd be great. So that's it. I appreciate it. Art, anything else?
nope, I'm looking forward to tomorrow. I hope you guys are as well.
All right, buckle up, folks. It's going to get exciting.
And the guys just stepped up the whole way. Calm, cool, collected. The quarterback, great read, good patience. More importantly, great job up front protecting this quarterback to give you a chance. And that's all you can ask for.
Trying to rally down 10. 9:25 to go here in the fourth. Short motion by Amendola from the left. Brady takes the shotgun snap. Stands in, throws it left for Amendola. Reaches up and snacks a high throw and lands inside the 10. Rolling to the 9. Ball slightly behind him, but Danny makes the grab.